She pulled off a huge upset a couple weeks back, upsetting an incumbent, longtime Democrat incumbent congressman in New York City, a 28-year-old, unknown at that time, she's no longer unknown, socialist, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She has been all over the public scene since her victory, talking about a number of different topics, and she said some things about economics and the unemployment rate and jobs that piqued my curiosity. Let's discuss that. Happy to be joined by Robby Sloan with Reason Magazine, who wrote a really interesting article about Miss Cortez. Robby, thank you for joining me. Let's go right to it. The question that Miss Cortez was asked on firing line. Here it is. Take a listen.
Now, the economy is going pretty strong, right? There's roughly 4% unemployment, 3.9% unemployment. Do you think that capitalism has failed to deliver for working class Americans, or is no longer the best vehicle for working class Americans?
Well, I think the numbers that you just talked about is part of the problem, right? Because we look at these figures and we say, oh, unemployment is low, everything is fine, right? Well, unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. Unemployment is low, no holds barred, Wild West, hyper-capitalism. What that means is profit at any cost. Capitalism has not always existed in the world, and it will not always exist in the world.
Now, Robby, I could spend my whole night going after the question itself. Has capitalism failed to deliver? I mean, what in God's name is she talking about? But Miss Cortez's answer, unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. Start there. What's she trying to say?
Right. Setting aside the broader sort of moral, philosophical condemnation of capitalism, right? She got the very basic economic question of what the unemployment rate is wrong. It doesn't matter how many jobs people are working. That doesn't factor into the employment rate. It just matters whether they have a job at all. So working double doesn't, artificially depress the unemployment rate. It's just literally the number of people with jobs divided by the number of people in the labor force. So that was kind of a totally wrong sort of basic answer that is not reflective of the question she was asked whatsoever.
Well, and then, Robby, the second part of her answer, again, people are working 60, 70, 80, now 90 hours a week and can barely feed their kids. She's painting such a dismal picture of how things are right now.
Right, she is, and she has no good sort of alternative, right, for what she's presenting. I mean, she calls herself a democratic socialist, but countries that are socialist have widespread sort of starvation and hunger and violence and crime and political rights being taken away from people. I mean, socialist countries are Venezuela or North Korea or Cuba. Look, you want to be critical of some of the excesses of capitalism, go right ahead, but let's not pretend that capitalism hasn't been this. I mean, it's been a wonderful thing for human flourishing and liberation over the last 200 years. 1 billion people lifted out of poverty in just the last few decades in the developing world, in countries that implemented market reforms, that started trading, that protected private property, right? Socialism is at the heart of what it is. It's not this sort of feel-good, everyone gets economic dignity. That's what she pretends it is. Socialism is the government taking control of private property and managing whole sectors of the economy.
Amen, Robby. You're spot on. And you and I know that. Now, Miss Cortez, who is a rising young star now, and I believe I don't know if she's an economist or she was an economics major, she touts her knowledge of economics. Do you think, Robby, she just doesn't have a grasp of this, or is she just a pretty solid kind of a socialist thinker?
I think she knows she has to pretend otherwise. I'm sure she knows that socialism doesn't work in practice ever. I mean, like, everybody who has studied this has to know this. But when I often talk to socialists, they truly do hate the productive class, the capitalist class, and they want everyone to be more equal, even if that means everyone has less materially, right? If we're all equal on the low end of the distribution, they would prefer that. They'd rather the rich didn't get very rich and were like everyone else, even if everyone else was worse off. So they have to pretend that socialism means something other than, seizing the means of production, nationalizing sectors of the economy, and everyone kind of, working in squalor and things falling apart. They have to pretend that it's just economic dignity. Who could be against economic dignity? I mean, that's not even a term that means anything. But these democratic socialists now pretend socialism is something other than what it actually is.
Exactly. And it's interesting, Robby. I got into it with Ms. Cortez today on Twitter a little bit, and she fired back at me that wages are low, and so that's driving people to 2 jobs. Can you make any sense of that?
Well, we do know, by the way, that the number of people working 2 jobs, according to data supplied by the government, it's like 5% of people. It's hovered historically around 5%. It's actually lower than it was a couple decades ago. Maybe people are doing jobs that these numbers don't reflect. Like, I don't know if this picks up, like if you're working, doing a couple Uber shifts or something later in the day. Maybe wages have stagnated. Possibly to some degree, but it's not just about wages, right? If we're having more economic growth and it's making food cheaper, if there's opportunities for people, it's not just maybe your wage hasn't budged, but we have more great stuff to make our lives more rewarding that's easily affordable with the wages we do have. So they focus on wages isn't really telling the whole picture of the economy. And I won't pretend that things couldn't be better. I'm sure if we got rid of more regulations, cut taxes, we allowed businesses to do more and offer more jobs. More people would. Now, not everyone would win. There are jobs that are going to go away, and those people are going to have to find something else to do. Like, that's true. Capitalism doesn't mean everyone gets everything they want all the time and life is perfect. But we don't have. But it does create a lot of flourishing and wealth for all society, and we haven't come up with any better system yet. If you have a better system, go ahead and propose it. We'll discuss it, but there isn't one that anyone has proposed yet.
So, Robby, Ms. Cortez has clearly become the symbol of something. Give me your thoughts on this broader issue, this notion of socialism. Is this, or is it just some sort of fad?
No, I think it's very real, but it's because people like Ocasio-Cortez define socialism in such broad and non-specific terms. I mean, they're saying it's just economic dignity. It's just having more generous health care coverage and a sort of more general welfare state, which is really just, I mean, that's what sort of President Obama offered from sort of a progressive leftist standpoint. And I have a lot of issues with that, but even that is not socialism. Socialism, again, is the government seizing private property, managing factories, by bureaucrats, by czars. We do too much of that already in this country, but doing more of it would be a disaster. That's what socialism is. She's not telling people that's what socialism is. Ask a young person, they just think it's a minimum wage, or it's paid worker leave, or it's just of good. Like, you can have those things and still have a market economy. Actually, Nordic states that are called socialist actually are market economies that they also provide, things to help people, and we can have a discussion about whether that's good or not. But that's not socialism.
Hey, Robby, great stuff. Great stuff. Robby Sloan, Reason Magazine. Thank you, my friend. The gallery of stupid coming up next.